Welcome to episode 2 of Under All Is the Land podcast. And since you people are new to our show, hey, what's up? You did not respond to the call to action from episode 1, which you may have to go back and watch if you're wondering what you've landed on now. But here's the intro until somebody steps up to be the voice of God. I will have to read it myself, thanks to ChatGPT, because if you want to know the good use of the devil's tool, this is it. Ladies and gentlemen, gather around because today's part 2 marks the dawning of a new era in real estate podcasting. From the heartland of America's neighborhoods to the pinnacles of industry power, we are here to bring back patriotism. We are here to restore truth, and we are here to remind all what it means to stand under all is the land. I forgot my flag wasn't visible. Let me move my chair. Okay. Since it's a new show, we can do what we want.
That's right.
Host, I am the unstoppable force of energy, integrity, and the American flag, the Southern spark plug who tells it like it is, Leigh Brown. Woo! And by my side, the man, the myth, the industry's fearless provocateur, the notorious R.O.B. Hahn. Woo! Together, we form a tag team unlike any other. That is the understatement of the year. Cutting through spin, challenging the status quo, and reigniting pride in the profession that builds the American dream. Buckle up, listeners, because this is Under All Is the Land. Welcome back to our show, Rob.
Welcome back, indeed. I mean, we definitely need to get like someone to step up and and do that for us.
We probably should have looked at any views that we had last time. We didn't pay attention, and we recorded it, loaded it, and rolled on. So if you want to see this and you think this needs a more professional look, then we welcome your expertise.
Well, and we'll see. Like the last one was really just an intro, and I think today marks where we really start to get into some topics. So maybe, this is what's required for people to feel like, you know what, I do want to step up and do an intro for those two.
That's fair. They might not want to have their name associated with us because we are probably going to ruffle some feathers today, and maybe we will upset some sacred cows.
Well, but at this point, like we talked about in the sort of the intro, I think it's you and I both decided if we're gonna upset some apple carts, if we need to, go after some sacred cow, so be it, right? I mean, like we talked about, we were both somewhat inspired by the fact that a young man, gave his life, for speaking the truth and having debates. The least we could do is upset some sacred cows, right? So for anyone, I'm going to remind, I guess, us and our listeners, what is our purpose, right? Our purpose comes from the fact that we both believe that the National Association of Realtors was founded as a patriotic organization, first and foremost. I can throw up the preamble again, but I'll just read just that one sentence, right? Realtors should recognize that the interests of the nation and its citizens require the highest and best use of land and widest distributed land ownership. So from the very beginning, and it talks about grave social responsibility and patriotic duty to which realtors should dedicate themselves. I'm not a realtor. You are. My wife's a realtor. Like all my friends are realtors. So we sort of agree if that's the origin, then what we're trying to do is remind our friends, remind the industry that these are the roots and maybe we should start going back to it. Now, it's one thing to just sort of say that, right? It's like just this loose patriotic duty, interest of the nation. It's another thing when we start getting into some real topics, right? And I think we wanted to use this episode maybe as a way of illustrating what that might look like. And again, and in the pre-show we talked about, you and I might not agree on all the solutions, right? And I think it would be weird if everyone agreed on like what should be done. What I think is important though is if we look at those solutions through the eye of patriotism, through the eye of, say, social responsibility, patriotic duty, interest in the nation and its citizens.
And we also forgot to mention in our opening missive that we agree there has to be an organization like the National Association of Realtors to be the voice for the Fifth Amendment, which I am a Fifth Amendment absolutist, and that means that you must protect private property. It says private property shall not be abolished. And so I think a lot of members hear Fifth Amendment, they think about the Miranda rights. They don't understand that's the core of property ownership. And while I have more beef with the National Association of Realtors than many people do for lots of reasons, and yes, I take it personally, I also know the value of the organization and I know the import of the organization.
Absolutely.
However, I don't believe the organization can survive until it regains its focus on exactly what we talked about in that first episode, which is what is highest and best use? What does it mean to
That's
be
right.
a true practitioner who's professional, who is understanding the grave responsibility of the job? If
That's right.
NAR will redirect itself correctly, I do think there's a lot of good that can come from the organization. And if NAR does not choose to do so, then whoever fills that vacuum, because somebody will fill the vacuum, has got to understand the
That's
Fifth
right.
Amendment and why real estate matters more than anybody's pet project
That's
or
right.
pet social
That's
justice
right.
warrior attitude.
And if I might add on to that, this is something that's really not, again, talked about in our history or our civics classes very much, but the Declaration of Independence, right? When it talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the original draft was never, it was not life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Who the hell knows what pursuit of happiness was? It was life, liberty, property. And if you look at sort of the philosophy, of sort of liberalism and kind of the revolutionary era in the 18th, 17th, and 18th centuries, it was around property, right? So 100% with you. And underlying kind of the American project is the notion of individual life, liberty, and private property, right? And as a libertarian, I take that real seriously because the libertarian philosophy is the entire sort of civil rights, the entirety begins with you own your life, right? And so anyway, 100% agreement. And I think it's also important for myself personally. This project feels a little bit like what it means to almost be like a constitutional conservative in this country. Like, I don't want to get rid of the United States. I love the Constitution. I think the Declaration and Constitution are the greatest documents ever invented, is the best form of government. Does that mean our current government, reflects that? No, not really.
No, because they're corruptocrats for the most part, but you're actually providing the perfect segue into what we're going to talk about today, because in those founding documents and in the Federalist Papers, the biggest conversation was about who was going to conduct the business of the
Hmm.
republic. And was that
Right.
going to be everybody, or was it going to be landowners? And so they wanted it to be landowners because that's who has the biggest stake in the ground.
That's right.
Now, this is what goes completely against a lot of the social justice information out there about renters' rights and tenant
Hmm.
rights. And it's
Hmm.
always tenant rights and renter rights. It's never landlord rights and property owner rights, which is backwards. And it
Right.
actually came to a huge head during COVID when landlords were sacrificed on the altar of free stuff for tenants, because
Hmm.
that's how the corruptocrats buy votes. And so if you wonder why we're talking about all these things, they're all connected, y'all. And so if you don't think that your elected officials looking at vote count is unrelated to property rights, you're absolutely crazy, because they know that it all plays into who controls whom. So the founding fathers wanted it to be property owners. Now, at the time, it was only white men. Was that fair? Of course not. Our country, because it's amazing, has course corrected many times and said,
That's
okay,
right.
skin color doesn't matter. Oh, okay, body parts don't matter. What matters is that you have the financial capability to purchase something, so you should have the right to purchase something.
Uh,
That's what it should boil down to. But not
I,
ev No, I didn't say your right to own it, I said your right to purchase it,
even
because
that,
there's 2 different things
yeah,
there.
even that. So before we get into the real theoretical stuff, so
Unless you wanna go into the whole, citizenry and
no, no, no.
that's a
Here's where
different
I want to go to.
conversation.
Here's where I want to go into. And I think if you think about, like, okay, fine. So we want to try and remind realtors of their patriotic duty and grave social responsibility. At this point, I don't think it can be debated that the single greatest socioeconomic issue we face as a nation is the fact that housing is unaffordable for the young. Somebody try and, I mean, if you want to debate me, like, I don't know if there's a more important issue than that as a country, right? And this is something that I think some of us, like, I've been like talking about this for at least 10 years. Um, but now it's becoming really, really obvious to everybody because home prices are just completely out of control. It is not affordable. And the young people, it's causing so many problems. And, speaking of kind of our inspiration for wanting to start this, Charlie Kirk, rest in peace. Like, one of the main things he started talking about in the last couple of years was because he was so in touch with sort of the youth. He was going around to college campuses speaking. He was talking about, look, one of the biggest problems we face as a country is the fact that younger generations do no longer have the American dream. They don't feel like they could own a home. And if you can't own a home, then it's hard to think about starting a family. It's hard to think about having babies. It's hard to think about putting down roots. It's hard to think about all the communities going back to, once again, under all is the land, right? Upon its wide utilization and widely allocated ownership. Like, if you cannot buy houses, all that sort of falls by the wayside. And then you might as well vote for Mamdani. You might as well vote for socialism. You might as well vote for whatever, housing is a human right. And it's funny how they always say housing is a human right. They don't say home ownership is a human right. It's just your ability to rent a cubicle, that's your human right. Like, it's all of this is connected. So to me, the number one problem in the country today, period, end of story, is the fact that younger generation working class people cannot buy houses. Now, let's say at the outset, you and I are both homeowners. You and I are both Gen X. We're not young. I benefited from the system that's already been set up. I 100% get it. And yet this is the crisis before us. You probably know better than most. So let's start with NAR has said that they were taking housing affordability very seriously, right? And they're lobbying, they're doing that. What has NAR's position been on how to make housing affordable, broadly and generally speaking?
Well, and maybe I've missed some communication. So full disclosure, they put out a lot of stuff, and I
Yeah.
can't read everything, all right? So from what I've paid attention to and read in the emails that I get and watching the headlines, everything NAR has done has been on the supply side. They are not addressing the demand side. And so if we want to go back to basic economics, everything is supply and demand. I was hoping more people would figure out how supply and demand work during the supply chain crises of 21 and 22. It didn't happen. And so when you start looking at housing, the realtors tend to advocate for just build more houses. We're 10 years behind on building houses. If I hear that one more time in a NAR economic speech, it's going to drive me nuts because I live in a county which is completely overrun by growth because we're so close to Charlotte. It's a metro
Right.
area. We're next to it. Our leadership right now is in nothing, no growth. We want nothing, pull the drawbridge up mode. And that's the bulk of the citizens out there. The majority are saying we don't want any more houses. And so, from a perspective of figuring things out, you cannot stay focused on one side of the issue. And in fact, if you're only going to look at it from a supply side perspective, you also see that play out in our policy initiatives in Washington, D.C., where the number one thing we've advocated for is, of course, and I totally agree with this, take off the caps on exclusion for capital gains so that our baby boomers don't feel like they're going to be hamstrung by selling. That will help the supply side, but it's not going to be a 10-year supply gap help. There's also talk about where you could provide incentives to investors like me, to a mom and pop. Let
Mhm.
us get rid of cap gains so we can offload properties and see if that helps. But you're also looking at the new bipartisan legislation. And just full disclosure, anytime they brag about it being bipartisan, my radar goes off. I don't trust any of them because that says they've sold everybody out, and I wish it weren't so. But I see this new bill coming up, and it wants to do things for developers and builders as tax credits. And we do need building, and some areas haven't had building, but that cannot be your only answer. And so if you look at what's causing the complete unevenness in the marketplace, you also have to look at the demand side. And the
Mm.
demand side is being obscured at best, but I just think we're being dishonest about it because nobody is willing to address the impact that the illegal immigrants have had on the demand side
Mhm.
for fear of being called racist.
Yep.
And it's not racist to ask questions about data, for heaven's sakes. And I've been trying to ask this of our staff on Capitol Hill for many years now. And all I'm ever told is not touching it, not
Right.
touching it, not touching it. And I said, I just want to know the data. Where are we accounting for the illegals? Because that's humans on American soil who are taking up housing. And you have to be honest enough with the conversation to say, okay, wherever you're from, you're here, you're taking up housing. If you go, that will relieve some of the demand pressure. If you stay, it doesn't. So what are we going to do? And that's where this is where the fear of speaking is one of the issues that NAR has to deal with, which is why it starts with Charlie Kirk and
Right.
let's have honest conversations.
So, it's so interesting. I remember maybe it was a year ago. I want to say JD Vance on the campaign trail gave a speech, kind of talk about that, right? Like Biden, whatever, let in, or not just Biden, it's the administration we've let in something like 20. No one really knows, right? That's one of the things. No one knows, but let's say 20 million people cross the border illegally. It's like that's going to have an impact on home prices. And people just accuse them of being racist or being xenophobe, this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, okay, but from a real estate standpoint, I remember going on Twitter just saying, if supply and demand, right, is a real thing, then presumably when you increase demand by 20 million, that's going to have an impact. And I had a real estate economist, what's her name, Daryl Fairweather from Redfin, basically just completely like denigrate that. And I'm going, okay, NAR, they never even address it. So that's a real problem. Like again, before politics, let's just if supply and demand is a law of economics and you've increased the number of people by 20 million, that is surely going to impact. The number one thing I've heard about that though, Leigh, is none of those people are buying anyway.
But they're utilizing housing. And so I can give you an example from the town that I live in. Now, granted, I'm in the county limits. It's the town that my address is in. This is a town that 20 years ago didn't look like it looks today. Because as
Mhm.
of today, there are 4 different subdivisions that are at 95% from the Indian subcontinent. Very nice people. They're very nice neighbors, but they ain't from around here. And so the neighborhoods that they've bought in, it's because in the Indian culture, people want to live near their family, and
Everyone does.
it's a multi-generational mindset, and I frankly think it's a great mindset to bring in. But now the town is 19% Indian. It wasn't that way 20 years ago. Well, what's happened with housing prices is they have gone crazy because you're talking people who are coming in with different income levels, different wealth backgrounds, and most of them are HB1s, and so they're getting bonuses from their companies. There's all kinds of setups going on. And I mean, frankly, my son's best friend, his family moved here from India a few years ago. Okay, it's not about who they are or where they're from, it's about the data point, and you can't bring in a 19% increase to your town without changing what
Yeah,
the housing numbers look like.
yeah. And
It
so
this is up.
I that's even a second tier problem. The first problem though is at least those people are legal immigrants,
Okay, so yeah,
right?
there's different ways to look at it, but just from the people who are gonna say, "I'm okay with legal immigrants," it doesn't
Right,
change that still changes it. But if you go to the illegal side, that's a different part of town. That's
right.
where we have the properties that are owned by LLCs, which I think is part of the challenge on tracking the numbers on the hedge fund owned houses, because each house is a separate LLC, so it's very hard to track, and I really wish today the Republican would look at this, but she's very
Hmm.
busy.
Yeah.
And so when I go into one of those houses as a realtor, there's a lock on every bedroom with a different key for every bedroom. There are 4 and 5 and 6 cars in the parking lot. They
Hmm.
park backed into the house with a license plate at the house, so you can't keep an eye on the tags. Everybody knows that each room is rented out. Well, to whom are they rented out? There is no way to track it because we don't have rental registration. And by the way, this is absolutely not a support for rental registration, because that's even worse than anything else that we do. But they're peppered all over the place. And so if that's a house that could have been bought by a first time buyer, but now it's been bought by a hedge fund and it's rented out to people that we have no way of tracking. I think that's where a lot of the illegals are able to find a space that is probably paid for by my taxpayer dollars, because
Right.
the NGO setup, you can't find all of them. And so they're embedded in our communities. And I know some of them are here working, but Rob, my whole thing with the illegals is if you're here and you're working, put your damn paperwork in. If you put your paperwork in, I'm actually not gonna be mad about you being here to work. But if you're
No.
here working and refuse to at least try to assimilate and do the paperwork, I can't get behind.
No. No, sorry. As a legal immigrant and child of legal immigrants, no, sorry. The problem with illegals, they all gotta go because otherwise we were the fucking idiots for going through it legally.
But what you don't think that
Right?
somebody who's here, who filed their paperwork and they're waiting on our system to catch up with them, you won't give them a little bit of grace?
No,
I will.
no, no. Because again, then what's the point of doing it legally? What is the point of going through the legal process if all you have to just cross the border illegally and then quote file paperwork? Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay, yes, but I also know that our system itself has to be fixed as well because it shouldn't
Sure.
take 5, 6, and 7 years for
Sure.
somebody to
That's fine. Sure, but that's a
Okay, my
bigger thing.
roofer would fight with me about this
Yeah.
because he refuses to talk to anybody unless they are fully legal because he went through the process to come here from Mexico legally. He spent all the money, he spent all the time, and he gets on his soapbox about it, and so, I mean, I hear it, and
Right. So, but that's an immigration thing. Here's the question. Basically, going to the idea that 20 million illegals in this country actually have no impact on home buyers
it's
because they're
false.
not buying houses. They can't get mortgages or they're not buying houses. I don't think that's true, but give me your sort of the realtor's take on that. Like, it's like, okay, fine. There are in your town maybe 100,000 illegals, but they're not buying houses. So what do you care? Why
Because
is that wrong?
because they take up housing space, and so when I look at the hedge fund apartments, alright, NAR has said nothing about the s I mean, how many hundreds of thousands of apartments have been built in the US over the last decade? I mean, they're on every zip code has these giant splashy apartment buildings. The downtown in Concord where I am, we have 3 of these huge, and we're a historic downtown. They threw in 3 big apartment complexes. They're at 30% occupancy. And so you're seeing these hedge fund apartments are everywhere. I, as a citizen, can't really pull who lives there, but they've been built for somebody. They weren't built for the young people that are my kids' friends' age because they don't have the pocketbooks to pay for granite counters, hardwood floors, floor to ceiling glass. Those hedge fund apartments are building are really nice. So
Hmm.
there's questions about the supply that has been built and for whom. So if you've got people that are here, we know that 22 million people are not homeless on the streets. So the illegals are somewhere. And the question is, where have they gone? They're in our communities. And so if you're thinking, but it doesn't really matter if they're in somebody's house, who cares? It's because every time a hedge fund LLC buys a house and rents out the 4 bedrooms to 4 people, that's another house that couldn't be purchased by a 26
So
year old who wants to get married.
here's a question though, Lee. I mean, you keep saying hedge funds, but you and I both know, at least the stats that exist, hedge funds make the institutional owners make up like 3% of owners.
I don't
The
think that
vast majority of landlords are independent, like individuals or families.
it says that they're independent, but I don't know that that's true because when I look around the tax records just in a neighborhood in my town, I can see that these properties are owned LLC, 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 LLC. And if I look at the apartment complexes, they're all held in different LLCs too, or they're
Sure,
REITs. And
sure,
so you start
but
adding it up, it's more than 1 or 2%.
but
That's
but Lee,
by inflation.
everyone does that, right? Like Sonny and I have a second home. It's under an LLC, right?
Right,
Every landlord
and
I
that's what
know.
I'm saying, and so that means it's easy for anybody looking at the data to say, "Oh, it's just a bunch of individual investors," without understanding that the individual LLCs are cloaked by a bigger organization, and the only I mean, I know you love Open Door, and I hate to say something nice about them, but at least the Open Door properties show up as Open Door LLC when they're
Mhm.
showing up in the tax records, so at least they're honest about what they do, as
Okay.
opposed to the stuff that we saw and being a realtor during the Great Recession, we saw the offers that would come in from 123 Main LLC A, and then you get an offer from 123 Main LLC B, and they would all have just a little variance in the name, which means if you go to the tax records to look who owns what, it looks like there's one here, one here, one here, one here. It doesn't add up.
Okay. So what's your guess? If you say that the number is wrong, what's your guess as to what percentage of rental properties are owned by institutions?
So rental property as in single family stock or
Any,
as in
any,
multifamily stock?
both.
Housing stock, period.
Housing stock period, what percentage do you think are owned by institutions, hedge funds, as opposed to the doctor, the retiree, the realtor, right?
I mean, it'd be nice if we could get this information from CoStar because they're the only real source of commercial data, but at least they've gotten away from their Saudi hedge fund ownership. And so now they've got different investors like
But
BlackRock. 'Cause
what's your guess?
I don't know. I don't know. In my town, I bet it's got to be at least 10 to 20% of the housing stock because I know
Okay,
how many BTR
fine.
neighborhoods I have. I know how many are LLC owned. The apartments are not owned by US companies. They're not
Right.
owned by individuals.
So let's just get the issue out there. That's fine. Even at 20%, that means 80% of rental properties are owned by individuals and families, right?
Single family. I don't think individuals own that many of the apartment complexes in the country because if we talk about how apartment complexes that have been built, let's just say since COVID, so let's say the last 5 years,
Hmm.
I bet they're 100% owned by a an investment entity, whether it's a hedge fund,
Okay.
NGO, a REIT. There's something bigger than they're not owned by John and Mary who have
Right.
some money to plow into investment real estate.
Sure. Sure. But John and Mary,
Spread them out.
fine. But John and Mary still own 80% of rental properties, right?
Single
Especially.
family, not a multifamily. The
Mm,
multifamily, I think, is where the illegals are.
maybe, but even the fourplexes are considered I mean, a lot of single families do own
Mm,
duplexes, fourplexes, etc.
see,
They don't.
I count a
Right,
fourplex as single family because that's 1 to 4 FHA, so it qualifies for owner occupant
fine.
financing.
But my point is, real estate investment is a major part of a lot of Americans, right?
It should be,
Uh,
yes, and I am an
yeah,
investor,
right.
and so it does matter, but I guess the way I'm looking at it too, Rob, is if you're going to separate the 2, the hedge funds that build these big fancy apartment complexes that are going up in every state and every town,
Hmm.
high dollar investment, expensive rentals.
Right.
The stuff that I buy and that most of my investors buy, we buy B and C class. We buy inexpensive stuff that we can make sure stays
Right.
available for affordable rentals
But
because without the mom and pop investors, there is no affordable rental because the hedge funds won't touch the B and C stuff that my investors buy.
here's the issue, though, like we talked about. The problem is, if I'm a 24-year-old today, I cannot even imagine owning a home.
Correct. And so
And I'm
this goes back
competing.
to the
Hold on.
generational
But I
warfare
know, but
too.
here now I'm competing for that BNC house. You know what? Maybe that's a fine starter home. Now I'm competing against you and wealthy doctors and John and Mary and so on. And they're obviously able to pay a lot more. They can pay cash. I can't. This is just a reality of it. And this is where things get really, really tricky, right? Now, here's the thing. From pure just free market capitalism, I believe in free market capitalism. So I'm like, look, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. At the same time, now I'm trying to say, okay, if you are a realtor who takes this idea of social responsibility and patriotic duty and the interests of this nation and citizens very seriously, and you recognize that the American dream is at the heart of kind of what it means to be an American, what binds us together, now it gets tricky. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's why I want to do this podcast. That's why I want to engage in these conversations because I'm not saying, therefore, hey, realtors should post rentals. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we have never actually talked about this issue with this perspective, right?
Oh,
And I know you're a patriot. So let's
and
hear
I
your
agree.
perspective on this.
It's
How
so
do you look at
complicated.
this? It's complicated, but how then do we think about this when young people in your town cannot afford to buy a house? Home prices are completely out of whack. We could talk about hedge funds all we want, but they're building, to your point, luxury multifamily 300 unit apartments. We don't care about that. Young people aren't buying those. Young people are buying starter homes. They're buying whatever, like a condo in some crappy unit, and they're just trying to get their feet on the ground, and they can't.
Okay, so let
What
me
do we
stop
do
you right
about that?
there. I
Yeah,
don't think a 24-year-old right now would buy the crappy condo that I was willing to buy at 24. Because in addition to the cost of housing going crazy, over the past decade at least, our young people have been trained into a mindset that tells them they must have what their parents have. I have seen this with young people. We call it
sure.
champagne taste on a beer budget. We can walk in a house. They are not willing to have shitty carpet and
Yep,
beat up walls, popcorn ceilings, laminate counters, and they get grossed out. And I'm like, come on, man. It's in your price range. At a certain point, put in some sweat equity, suck it up for 3 years, and then you're on the ladder. Get on the ladder, get on the ladder, get on the
that's
ladder.
right.
So then I went back to Tallahassee to present to the realtors there because I went to Florida State, go Knowles. And so when I drive into Tallahassee, this is, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, I was like, holy crap, where's the little crappy places that I hung out and went to parties because they weren't nice? They're gone and they've been replaced by really nice apartments. And so I'm asking my friends on campus, like, where are the where's the college housing? And they said, that is college housing because the parents are footing the bill for all this. And so the
That's
parents
right.
have unwittingly trained their kids into never accepting less than. And so they won't accept less than, so they won't get started on the ladder. And so what happens is the 24-year-old who should have bought that really crappy condo or that beat up starter home says they're it's just not good enough for them. I'll just rent. And so they go to rent from the hedge funds. They get the hardwood floors, granite countertops, floor to ceiling glass concierge. They get their good life. And so now to buy feels like he stepped down from where they were,
Sure.
which means that they didn't buy that starter home and the seller says, but I got to sell it. And then the investor comes in to buy it, does the flip on it. Now the
Sure.
value went up and the first timer couldn't buy it. And so I think there's multiple things we have to address here. And I made a video last week and I was basically talking about the fact that everybody wants their own bathroom now. It is a thing. And you could even see it in the comments. There were some people like, yeah, we shared growing up. We were fine. Other people say, well, if I had to share growing up, my kids don't have to share now. I'm like, see, now this is
Hmm.
trying to keep people from hardships, keeps them from making progress. And if we have this conversation about starter homes, which is happening all the time, I do say NAR getting into the starter home conversation. We need to encourage by tax credits and builders to build starter homes. And I'm just sitting here thinking, go ahead and build a starter home and don't put in granite and don't put in LVP floors and don't make it perfect. And the first time buyers are going to walk in and do this and say, it's not what I want. I'll wait. And so they put themselves into perpetual waiting, which means they never buy. Then they sit around waiting for their parents to die so they can have their parents' house because there's a generational warfare thing going on between the Z's and the boomers. And you've seen it on Twitter as much as I have, and it destroys me to read people
Sure.
that say, when the boomers need to die and give us their real estate, the boomers need
But
to get out of the
no,
way.
no, that's cool, Lee. Here's the thing.
Disturbing.
But the problem is everything you just said just says then we should just maintain the status quo.
No, it doesn't. I'm saying as
It does.
parents, Gen X parents and
Right.
boomer parents are going to have to stop bankrolling their kids at a certain point. And
I, I know, but that's again, if that should happen today. In other words, like from a policy standpoint, from a practice standpoint, like if the Gen Z, whatever, if the young people don't want it, they turn their nose up. So we should just leave everything the same.
no, I'm not
And I'm
saying
just sitting here saying,
what is the answer? It's if it's building more property that they don't want with enough
right,
upgrades that they want and the price stays high, that doesn't solve it.
right.
Throwing tax credits at it and down payment assistance, not
So
always the answer. We keep trying that too, and it's not a money thing. I think it's more mindset than money.
I think where I want to start with though is it should, in my opinion, the whole conversation needs to be, it should be a priority for a realtor. Again, I'm not talking about licensees. I'm not talking about brokerages or companies. I'm not talking about publicly traded institutions who have to enter shareholders. I'm talking about the individual man and woman who's read the preamble, who says, I want to be a realtor. And I take the interests of this nation seriously and its citizens seriously. I am a patriot. Okay. Start with that as like the starting point. And you're right. Then the way I look at it is, okay, then we all then from the realtor standpoint have to say, we don't necessarily know what the answer is, but it is absolutely critical that we somehow figure out a way for young people to be able to afford houses. Right? Can we agree on that? That's
Yes.
the starting point. Like if we say this is not a priority, or if there's a higher priority, then in other words, the higher priority is, yeah, but the seller needs to make a bunch of money, then guess what? We don't really care that much about affordability housing. We have to start with the affordability housing must be like, if not the top priority, somebody needs to tell me what's a higher priority than that. Right.
But it's multifaceted though, Rob, because if we just talk about affordability of housing, then we're talking about it being a price solution. And anytime we try to do fixed pricing and fixed solutions,
Hmm.
that's socialism. And so that
Yes.
failed. And so what we have to figure out as well as figuring there's got to be a pathway to ownership for young people. It doesn't exist in a lot of markets right now.
Sure.
It does
And
exist in others.
so
And I
Lee,
don't
and here's what I'm getting at, right? No, I agree with you, right? So if we start with, yes, it's an absolute priority. Okay, that's the top priority.
they have to want it,
Then
Rob. How do we get young people to want housing again? Do they want
look,
it?
I think they all want it.
I Do they? When they make
Yeah.
their angry videos on TikTok with their iPhones and their nails, their hair done, and they sit there and say they want housing, but they're not showing, here's what I'll sacrifice. Where's my sacrifice in return? I feel like there's not a two-way street right now, and that bothers me as a parent.
I guess why I look at it as
Work a second job to get my down payment.
No, look, I mean, we could talk about it when in our day, absolutely. I'm just like, to me, fundamentally, I think all human beings, almost all human beings, want a place to call their own.
Except in blue cities. I don't know if in blue
I don't
cities.
know. Even in blue cities, they want a place to call their own. They just can't afford any of that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just don't think people love renting, right?
I
And it
don't.
has nothing to do with like financial. It has nothing to do with any of that, right? If
Oh,
you're a
here's
renter,
where I'll concede with you. Housing affordability and
yeah,
homeownership is a primary issue for Gen Z.
there's no question.
But
Then here's the
I
thing.
can't give to you that we have that our generation has to solve it for them because I think that's how Gen Z wound up where it is.
Well, I don't know if it's a generation we have to solve it for them. It's just as a nation, if we do not solve this issue, then where that leads is violent revolution. That is
Correct.
my firm
I do
belief.
think that's where the whole
That
generational warfare is gonna
I,
come in. You're right.
we call it whatever you want, but if I'm 22 and I just graduated college with whatever, right? And I'm like, I'm never gonna own a home. And since I don't own a home, I'm never gonna get married. I'm never gonna have children. I'm not invested in the society. What the hell do I care? I'll just burn it down. And you could talk at me, the Gen Xers and the boomers could yap at me about your moral and your ethics and you shouldn't get violent. Why? I'll get violent. What? I'll burn the whole city down. What have I lost? I haven't lost a damn thing. I can't own any of it anyway. And my point is, if we don't solve, and this was what Charlie Kirk talked about, it's what a lot of the smarter people, both left and right, by the way, are starting to point out. If people have no investment in the society, they will just burn it down. It's that simple, right? So to me, the American dream isn't just this like idealistic aspirational thing. The reason why the founders limited the votes to landowners wasn't simply because they wanted people at a stake in this country. They wanted people who have a stake in the society to say, I want to vote for that because I have a stake in it. And here's the thing, at a smaller micro level, we all know this, and especially realtors know it. Because when you walk into a neighborhood and it's a neighborhood of owners,
Right.
it's very different vibe than a neighborhood of renters, right?
100%.
So if we become a nation of renters, then guess what? They're going to burn the whole thing down, right? And the Gen Xers and the boomers are like, but we want free market, blah, blah, blah. Look, man, when the angry mob is burning shit down, you're not going to care. You know what I mean? Like all this, like, but you shouldn't do that. You should, like, all that goes out the window. Meaning, we got to solve this problem now and give the younger generation, the working class people in this country, a stake in it. Like some way of, look, if you genuinely don't want to own a house, then you don't have to own a house, but that's on you. It's not because you feel like you can never own a house, you can never afford it.
Okay,
So,
so then let me ask this question then. If we remove 22 million illegals from this country, if we actually do mass deportation, which I'm so sad that people don't have the stomach for it except for a few of us, but it does have to happen. So you eject 22 million people, housing prices won't move immediately because the investors will have all their vacant property they'll have to deal with for a minute. Then they'll start to offload it. Investors can generally take a lower price than a homeowner because they're not emotionally attached. So it settles pricing down. Now people can buy again. What do we do about the fact that the Gen Zs are the most in favor of the illegals because they think it's the moral thing to let anybody live here at any time? And so their generation is actually promoting the problem that's keeping them out of housing. So how do we
yeah, I think
so does
that's
this mean it's time for the realtors to finally address the demand side and as an
well,
organization say, look,
right. So this
you
is where,
can't absorb the whole world
right.
and have affordable housing.
It's to me, it's not about like, well, it's going to work and we're going to solve it. No, no, no. Like we can only control what we control, right? Realtors are not Congress.
It's probably for the best.
Right? That's all I'm saying. Like, I'm not the president. Like, you're not the HUD secretary. Like, we are not in position of power. What is that we can control? Here's what I'm one of the things I do think we can control, and this is exactly in line. NAR has never come out with a statement asking for mass deportation. NAR has never come out with a statement saying illegal immigration is bad for this country. That is something that realtors control. In other
Correct.
words, it's not necessarily about, well, Gen Z this, the politics that, forget all that. I'm saying, look at the goddamn preamble. If you say housing affordability is important, then there is no way to justify having 25 million people who shouldn't be here. Because realtors fully understand the impact of that on the local communities, on home sale prices, on everything. Okay. So to me, if NAR were a patriotic organization, then to me, there's no way that it does not come out saying we got to have mass deportation.
It's
So
the
this is
only
how we
answer.
bring it all down to this point. If you are a patriot and you care about this country and its citizens, I don't see how in the world you don't say we got to get the illegals out.
I don't either, because we also all know that educational systems are tied to property values, and our schools can't keep going in the pathway they're going when teachers have to spend an inordinate amount of time on English as a second
Right.
language, and it's
Right.
not just one second language, it's a bunch of them. And so you at some point, the members have to tell the leadership. I've
Bingo.
seen it in my community. There was an interview done with a former teacher in Rochester, Minnesota, and she was talking about the culture in the school she was in, and that the school was being run by Sharia law. And as a teacher, she was told she couldn't talk to fathers and she couldn't speak to men. So you're talking about that happening on American soil because you have unfettered illegal immigration. And so what happens to the house prices around that school? And then
Right.
what happens to housing opportunities for women? And so now we're going to go into protected classes. And so are we going to sacrifice women
It's
under Sharia law to satisfy illegal immigrants who aren't supposed to be in the first place? The layers continue and
the
continue.
layers continue. But here's the thing, Lee. I'm just getting so let's just if we clarify and simplify, to me, I'm like, okay, the low-hanging fruit to me is, hey, realtors, you should be agitating for your leadership, for the most powerful lobby in the country as it comes to property, to clearly say we need remigration. That to me is low hanging fruit. These people are not supposed to be here, right? They need to go. That is such an easy low hanging fruit,
Well,
right?
can we grab the other low hanging fruit? Because if people are going to reach out to leadership, they should also be willing to say that foreign adversarial governments shouldn't own great swaths of land in the U.S. Because if you're going to talk about the demand side and the supply side, we have the Chinese Communist government buying up land next to military installations.
Sure.
It's happening right in North Carolina. But if you mention it, you're a racist. I'm like, how is it racist to say I don't want an adversarial communist government to own land next to our
Right.
national military installations or any of our farmland? No, that's not good. Now, if you're a Chinese person who moved here and you followed the immigration process and you're an American now, great, buy something. I'm cool. You're
Right.
not the Chinese Communist Party. And
Right.
I'm tired of those two being conflated. I got in trouble with an audience where I made a comment about the TikTok and how it's being used as a tool by the Chinese Communist government, which it is. And then they told me I was racist for saying that. And I'm like, what does that have to do with race? It's not. That's a communist government that wants to take us down. That's not good. I
Well, yeah,
America fall, so I
sure.
don't want our land held by adversarial governments.
Look, when somebody calls you race, just means shut up. Right. I mean, that's all it
It's a
means.
lazy argument, but
Well, it's not even an argument. It's just shut up. Right. I
I mean,
mean,
if we're gonna do deportation, we should include the deportation of other governments owning American land, period. In fact, I was listening to a podcast, I can't remember whose it was, talking about how foreign embassies own their own dirt that they're owned in Washington, D.C. I think that's crap. They should not be able to own anything in the
nah,
US. No.
that's different. I mean, embassies, we have the same rights as well. Hold on. But I do want
I
to share
I don't
something
know
with
if they
you.
should own that dirt, though. They can have a 99-year lease on the house or something, but, like, why does the UN own any dirt in New York City after last week?
It, it's just the nature of
Yeah.
diplomacy, and we all need that. Hold on, my phone is going off, and I'm trying to
Key
silence it.
findings. What report is this from?
Stop. Okay. So this, I wanted to share. So the reason why I wanted to, there's like so many layers, so many layers, and I think anyone who's listening could come up with all sorts of their own angles as well. I'm just saying, to me, the first low hanging fruit is NAR and realtors should be opposing illegal immigration and should be supporting removal of illegal migrants. Period. And it's not even because we hate them or anything, just
There's no
supply and
emotion
demand.
involved. This
Right.
is a
It's
demand side issue.
supply and demand. There are 20 million or 25 million, or however many million people here who should not be here. That is making it harder for our Americans to buy houses or to have affordable rentals, whatever it is. Simply removing the demand is going to have an impact on price. that is going to make housing more affordable. Therefore, we should be supporting it. If realtors are patriots. So all of this is presuming realtors are patriots. To me, that's a low-hanging fruit. This one is more difficult, and it goes right to what you were talking about. So NAR really, in the past, in lobbying efforts and messaging and everything else, really supports international investors in United States residential real estate. So international transactions, blah, blah, blah. This is a study. This is NAR's website, right? And here are some key findings. $56 billion volume of foreign buyer residential purchase during April to March. Okay. 56 billion in 1 year was by foreign buyers. Okay. 78,100 number of foreign buyers existing home purchase during that same period. And of that number, 56% of foreign buyers reside in the United States, recent immigrants, less than 2 years at the time of transaction, or non-immigrant visa holders. And that means 44% of foreign investors did not live here. Okay. Percent who paid cash, 47% purchased property for use of vacation home rental, or both. 77% foreign buyers who purchased detached single-family home or townhome. 44% foreign buyers who purchased in a suburban area. Now, this one's really difficult, right? And I'm saying, look, saying, hey, we should get rid of illegals, that's an easy one. So the fact that NAR hasn't even done that is concerning. That is like, they broke the law, they shouldn't be here, let's get them out. That seems like a real low-hanging fruit. This one is hard. This one is significantly harder. So the question is, if we take as a given that our entire program here is to say, hey, realtors, you are patriots. You care about this nation and its citizens first and foremost. What then should be your position on international buyers of residential real estate?
Well, I was teaching in Thailand 1 year ago. This next month, actually, I was in October of last year, and Thailand does not allow foreign ownership of their real estate.
Same
And
thing with Singapore, by the way.
I've taught in Vietnam. Vietnam does not allow foreign ownership of real estate. You can buy a lease on the physical building, but you cannot own the land. And when I was speaking to some people in South Vietnam, so in the formerly known as Saigon area, which if you are a good patriot, you call it Saigon, because they're very salty about how things went down, just to say the least. They don't want the Chinese to buy their land because it's so adversarial that they don't want anybody buying it. And their culture is strong. They know who they are. They welcome outsiders to come in and vacation and spend time and be a part of their country. And the same thing in Thailand. They welcome visitors from all over the world to come to their beautiful beaches and come to the cities and be there, but you're not going to own it because that's the way their kingdom is set up. And I don't know that that's bad. But then again, I'll flip that around and look at my town. My town has H-1B buyers here. And my question is always, all right, what happens if your job ends? Are you going to stay? Are you going to go home? And then what happens to your house? And you're not part of the fabric of North Carolina because you have no incentive to be when you live in a neighborhood that is 100% your peers. So you're insulating yourself on foreign soil, and I don't know that that benefits the U.S., and I don't know that it benefits the idea of patriotism, because to me it seems like if you're here, you want to be here, you want to be all in. I want to be America. I don't want to come here and build my own little enclave because I couldn't do that anywhere else. I
So
don't know what the answer is, because I
I
love
know.
buyers I've worked with. They're lovely people, and the ones I've worked with have a driving desire to be here and not there because they value this country. But by that same token, they value this country, but they don't want to assimilate. And I guess that's where I can't get that circle to square. Like, you
That's
can be here and you're
right.
awesome and you're great, but you don't want to assimilate. Why don't you want to assimilate if we're so great?
Well, so this is why I'm saying this issue is much harder than to get the illegals out issue.
Well, yeah,
That one to me
and
is
the
a low
North
hanging,
is
right?
very emotional anyway. We love our people. I love my
That's right.
clients. I love their
Right.
culture. I love when they cook for me.
Right.
Like, I love learning about them, but they're not North Carolina people. They're just not.
So let's take it at the most difficult issue, right? And this is why, and here's the thing, Lee, nobody in the industry is even having this conversation right now.
I mean, getting the
Okay.
government out's the easy part, so I can
So,
absolutely I don't
so
want foreign governments here, but the foreign buyers,
sure, foreign buyers. So
now the answer.
the really difficult, so the really difficult one is, should people who are not American citizens be allowed to own American real estate?
I'm gonna just say that based on our current population, our current situation with not knowing even who we are as a country, I don't think we can allow it until we get that fixed, because right now, if I ask anybody, "What does it mean to be an American?"
Oof,
They
that's
can't
tough.
answer that question, and so until
Right,
we answer
right.
that question, we can't say yes because, alright, if I can define it in my way, but there's no general sense of "We are America," like there was on September 12th, 2001. That was the day we all said, "As a country, we are one," and we haven't
Mhm.
had that since then. We didn't have it. It broke my heart that we didn't even have it after Charlie Kirk. That should have been "We Are America" moment. So, we as a realtor, a buyer calls me, they're not from around here.
They're
They
no, they're from no, hold on. They're from your town. They're just not a citizen.
they're well, they might be from my town and not a citizen, they might be from another country and moving to my town because their friends and
Right.
family are already
Sure.
here, and so it's
Right.
all the layers. So if they were to ask me, "What does it mean to live what does it mean to be an American real estate owner?" I couldn't give an answer to that because we don't have an answer for who America is right now. And so if I say, "I want you to assimilate," they say, "Okay, cool, I'm all in. What am I assimilating to?"
Mhm.
And I
Yeah,
don't
so that's why I'm trying to this is so hard. So to me, this was
well, it
harder.
starts with the language, and so if we make a rule that you have to speak English only, can we start there?
I don't
Because I'm
know.
tired of Spanish language commercials on my Hulu app. Why are they talking to me in Spanish in America? If I go
Eh,
to Argentina, I don't expect to hear English commercials. I expect to have to lean on to my very limited
yeah.
Spanish.
I mean, but that's where your cultural conservatism is a little stronger than mine. I just posed this question because I think that question is very, very hard. So let's make it a little bit easier, right? Remember, the initial thing that's really hard is, should someone who is not an American citizen be allowed to own American real estate? That's really hard. Okay. Here's one that's a little bit easier. Should someone who is not an American citizen be allowed to invest in American real estate? Because now the first one's so hard because, look, I mean, I got my citizenship when I was significantly older, right? Because it takes so long if you do it legally. So you know what? You could be here, have your green card, want to be an American, want to assimilate. You lived in the town for 10 years or whatever it is. And boy, I have some money. I would like to buy a place to live. I want a piece of the American dream. I'm like, I don't see how as an industry, can say, sorry, you can't own a house because you're not a citizen, right? That's why I think that first question is so hard. However, if it's not for you to live in, if it's not because you want to be part of the American dream, if it's simply because you think it's good investment and you're the 44% of foreign buyers who don't live here, it's like, I just want a investment property. At a time when American citizens are having a tough time buying, that I think is a little bit easier for the patriot realtors to be like, listen, until we solve this affordability thing, until
Right.
Gen Z Americans feel like they can afford to buy a house if they want to, we're going to say no thanks to taking your money for investment property here.
I can
I
agree
think,
with that.
I think that's easier, right?
That's easier. I think where you get the most pushback is gonna be your resort areas with your resort
Yep.
condos, like
Yep. Yep.
Miami,
Yep.
huge problem, Southern Cal, where you've got so many they've got access points, right?
Right.
Because our country geographically is so big, and so that's where
Right.
your pushback comes from. But yes, we can agree on that. No
Right.
foreign investments until we figure out what we're doing.
Right. Until the housing affordability crisis is behind us, could we maybe start advocating for, let's pause on the foreign investors? This is not their primary residence. It's a investment. Thanks, but no thanks. That feels like something that a patriot realtor could advocate without being a racist, without being a xenophobe, without being any of those things. Because again, we know that all that means is shut up, right?
Exactly, and that means that my neighbors who are here, who are actually doing their best to be a part of the country, they just don't
Right.
know how to assimilate because we don't know who we are. Frankly, I can't even blame them. at the end of the day for not assimilating well because our 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 Americans are fighting over who's what the flag means right
Sure,
now, so there's
sure.
that. So, okay,
There's
we
that.
yeah, no
So
foreign government purchases, no foreign investors, and no more, illegals, get rid of them. We could start there.
that feels so the reason why I wanted to go through all of this, again, I'm not saying you and I have all the answers. In fact, I'm not saying we have any of the
Any of the
answers.
ans
However, what I want to do, what I want to get the entire industry, at least the realtors who give a shit, because let's face it, a lot of them are just like, whatever, I don't care, you guys are stupid because it's just all about getting the commission check. Okay, cool, man. You do you. Free market capitalism, good for you. Have at it. I'm not even condemning.
that's how the problem is, that's how we landed where we are, is
Correct.
we've continued to
Correct.
put the blinders on and say,
Right.
"I'm just gonna work one transaction at a time."
But right. But here's the thing, Leo. I'm saying I don't even condemn them. I'm like, no, no, you do you. That's fine. What I'm appealing to, though, are those people because as we talked about in the first episode, so many of the realtors I know are patriots. I know they love this country. I know they're so for those people, this is like over and above. This is not, I'm not expecting you to do this as part of your license. I'm expecting if you say, I believe in this, I'm a patriot, I love this country, I love the citizens, and that's the priority, then those of us who feel that way need to start at least looking at these things and then thinking through them through the lens of what's best for this country right now, in our moment right
Well,
now.
and there is a secret Facebook group of the Patriot Realtors that we welcome people to who are in this mindset, and a lot
Right,
of people do have relationships with policymakers,
right,
and the challenge is you're the person with a relationship with somebody that's got influence. You may have to be speaking against what the trade association says
right.
because trade association says nothing, then
Or they
somebody
say the opposite. I mean, right now, NAR's position is international investment is fantastic, and it just brings more money in and makes our members money. I'm like, that's cool,
but
guys.
again,
If
they're adding demand, and so just take everything
bingo,
back to as a core economic supply and demand equation.
bingo.
Everything NAR talks about is supply side or it's increasing demand. They have said 0 about decreasing demand outside of the US so that we can give an opportunity
Right,
inside, and we gotta
right,
cycle back to Charlie Kirk, and
right.
maybe we have to insert the clip that when Tucker Carlson did his post Charlie Kirk assassination, he brought on Cenk Uygur, who is
Yep,
the Young Turks podcast. He's far left progressive. I don't
that's
listen
right.
to that show because it makes my blood pressure go up, but I know who Cenk is because he's been doing that for over 20 years, and he's
Yeah,
very well respected in
yep,
that thought chamber. And Cenk did a conversation with Charlie, and the one thing they agreed on was housing
yep.
and how the affordability situation is a time bomb in the Gen
Yes,
Zs. And I'm listening to this thinking, holy crap, you've got a far left podcaster talking to the right wing, talks to the young people debate guy on the show with the guy who can best be described as the pokes a stick into things. They're talking about something my trade association won't address
right.
because our trade association only talks about housing in terms of we need affordability, we need houses instead of
It's I wish it were
gotta
even
be
that
willing
simple.
to go deeper.
No, Lee, I wish you even that simple because what I've seen from NAR from it's more of an outsider perspective is their big thing is just get mortgage cheaper. So it's not even we need like yes, they talk about we need more supply, but it's like we just need first time home buyer credit, we need low mortgage rates, we just need to
See,
just
and that's probably a
lend more money.
because everything they want to do increases inflation because everything they want
Right.
to do is QE, which is quantitative easing. And so every time you print money, you devalue money, which drives costs up, which means nobody can buy anything.
But here's the thing, Lee, that
Advocate for policies that make things less affordable.
I know, but that's because NAR over the last couple of decades has become really more like a union, and all they care about is how to make their members more money. So if we bring it back to the origins of NAR was not created to make realtors more money. NAR was created because there were honest, decent real estate men who definitely cared about this country and its people, and they were trying to figure out how do we advocate for what's best for all of society, for our civilization, for like that's why it's created. So this whole effort for me is reminding realtors that's who you are. You are not a fucking labor union just here to maximize your commission dollars. Let people do that. That's doing business. That's fine. Do that over there. Realtors care about this country. Realtors are patriots, and they might say, you know what, maybe that's not going to be that great for my commission check, but it's better for the country. So I'm going to advocate for that. That's who I think realtors are. That's who I think you are. That's why these things are so difficult, right? And look, in future chats, we have to get into topics where maybe the interests of the nation conflict with the interests of the client. That's got to be a real hard call. That and again, I'm not trying to be moralistic. I'm not trying to judge.
It's okay. Our members don't really understand the depth of what fiduciary means anyways. That's okay.
True. And so it's trying to bring all that back. And here's the thing: these are conversations we have not had as an industry for as long as I've been in it.
Which is
The
why
entire
I
time.
hope that anybody who landed on this episode and is either agreeing with us or furious with us, that you
You're
will
right.
comment and
Right.
share and talk to us,
That's
because
right. That's right.
these are these are not made up issues. These
No.
are the topics that are going to determine whether or not people can buy anything over the next 10 to 20 years, because we are at a turning point
Oh,
in the country right now. And if we don't get busy solving it, we have a Gen Z that over 30% of them believe that political disagreement justifies violence. And so if you're
right.
not paying attention to the data for how much unrest is in that generation,
Right.
then you're fooling yourself. And so when you know that's the underlying current, then we have to get really bold and talk about, if these are the issues, here
Right.
are the ways that we can discuss it so that
That's
these
right.
solutions can
That's right.
appear,
That's
because
right.
it's not gonna be an easy solution, and you can't
No.
make an omelet without breaking some eggs, and that's
And
what's gonna have to happen.
and here's the thing, guys. Neither of us are proposing specific policy directions because it gets super
We're not
complicated.
elected, we're not in leadership, we're just
We're not. Right.
talking.
But here's what we're trying to get everyone to do is whatever the solution is, right? Because smart policy wonks will come up. So I'll give you an example. Maybe the answer is, look, FHA is only going to guarantee loans by citizens. Just, that
Yeah.
as an example, right? The issue is then we as this sort of patriotic realtor community have to look at that and go, is this good for the country? Is this good for its citizens? Like that's the lens and the filter through which we should be examining every policy proposal. Here's another one. We should have the federal government guarantee flood insurance, right? Okay, like it's a complicated issue with all
Very
sides to it,
complicated.
right? I'm just saying, but then we've only always looked at it from the perspective of, does this make more money for our members? How about if we look at it through the perspective, is this good for the nation and its citizens? That's why we're doing this. So we're going to keep bringing up topic after topic after topic, whatever it is. And I don't think either of us would claim to say we have the answer. What we're trying to do is to examine whatever that topic is, whatever that suggestion is, through the lens of, is this good for the nation and its citizens? And we hope that this was entertaining for you. I know I had fun. And we hope that we're going to hear from the other audience as well. Absolutely disagree with anything I've said or Leigh said. Absolutely say you guys are getting this all wrong. But here's the thing. When you say you're getting it wrong, what I want to hear from you is why it's wrong from the perspective of what's good for the nation and its citizens. That's the lens. That's the North Star through which we are going to examine everything. So, always awesome. If you are interested in being the voice of God to do the intro, please let us know.
Hit us up. We are looking for somebody to read this so I don't have to read it again, because obviously.
All right. Well, great chatting with you as always. We will pick up another topic next week. Another controversial. I know we're good because there's so many. There's so much out there that we got to
But
talk
hey,
about.
hit the bell, share it,
Yep.
subscribe. I
Yep.
mean, we don't know what we're gonna talk about next, and so you may
That's
as
right.
well come along for the ride.
That's right. But the news is always full of things. Like I'll give you an example.
I have so many headlines we could talk about.
Like headlines, like right now, Compass acquired Anywhere. They're fighting with Zillow. And there's all this private listings from like all this client, seller interest versus open public. What if we
And
looked at
I'm
it from,
old. I remember the MLS book, and they're
yeah,
trying to recreate the thing we got away from. Next thing, they want me to go to drive to an office and pick up a key, and please
right,
don't bring that back.
Leigh, here's the thing. All we have to do is to say, okay, if we were looking at this from a nation and its citizens perspective, which is better? A perspective no one has ever talked about,
Yeah.
right? So with that, great chatting with you.
We'll
Thanks
see
for
you
listening
next
to
time.
Jammer. See you guys next time. Bye, y'all.